An Oxford professor is being accompanied to lectures by university staff whose job is to protect her from what she regards as a credible threat from some students. She is Selina Todd. She's Professor of Modern History at St Hilda's College. And the threat comes, she says, from some trans rights activists who say her views on the need to protect women's spaces from people who self-identify as women but are anatomically male are unacceptable and must be shut down. She's been telling me about what she describes as a campaign against her.
When I first heard about the threats, the thing that worried me was that I knew from my experience of speaking at women's rights meetings that sometimes there had been attempts to disrupt those meetings, that there'd been quite antagonistic, shall we say, quite confrontational protest outside. And also my previous experience of facing a campaign by stealth against me within academia from academic scholars as well as students did lead me to feel very vulnerable. I was also very struck that the university, rightly, I think, having heard from me about threats that I'd only heard about secondhand, did its own very quick investigation and said to me that on the basis of what they could find in social media, they were convinced that there was enough evidence to provide protection in the lectures. The two men in question made sure that they arrived before the students so that, that would potentially diffuse, any potential action that might have taken place.
What is the importance of this outside Oxford, indeed outside academia?
I think that in the world today, democracy is under threat, and that therefore we all have to defend the right of people to have freedom of speech and freedom of debate. And I think that also within a democracy, arguments about rights are always current. As a historian, I know that it's absolutely not the case that you can just say, well, trans people's rights matter more than women's rights. You've all got to shut up. That's not how democracies work. It's always the case that groups' needs and interests can conflict with those of other equally legitimate groups. And it's the job of a democratic state to weigh up the available evidence, to have an open debate about that, and to work out how best to accommodate the needs of all legitimate groups within a society and balance their conflicting needs.
But I suppose that's one of the issues, isn't it? I mean, it's an issue we deal with on this programme quite a lot when people talk about gay rights, and there are some scholars, there are some others who say things that are seen by some groups to attack not just their policies, their behaviour, but actually their very identity. And that's the point, I suppose, that some trans people make, that as soon as you get into this area, you're undermining people's individual selves.
Yes, and I understand that this is a very fraught issue. What I'd say to that comparison, which is very often made, is that in articulating their rights, gay men and lesbians have not sought to say, ergo, we are heterosexual. And the issue with current transgender ideology, and I do make a distinction between small groups of trans activists and large numbers of trans people who are just trying to get on and live their lives, but the kind of transgender ideology that's being put out by trans activists is to say that the definitions of men and women, and particularly women, should be changed, and that therefore the sex-based rights that women fought for many years, including, for example, my right to lecture at Oxford University, which only gave women the right to take a degree 100 years ago, that actually we should not be understood as a sex, and that would take away women's rights, such as the right to, for example, have single-sex refuges. But I think the wider debate here as well is about what are universities for? And to my mind, therefore, modelling respectful democratic debate. And that's what we should be allowed to do. Evidence-based debate, not bigotry. And this might sound like a storm in a teacup and something that's just about student activists, but students become graduates. And Oxford students tend to become graduates who go into things like politics, the media, the civil service. So if they are learning that no debate is the way to run a society, we should all be worried.
Professor Selina Todd, thank you very much for talking to us.
Thank you, Justin.